This is the Roots and Arrows podcast. I'm your host, Lori Thornton. Listen in as I invite some special guests to sit down with me, tell our best stories about raising children, share insights and ideas, and riff on what it means to parent alongside the Holy Spirit. This podcast is a feature of the curated email newsletter Roots and Arrows, in which I use my ninja-like research skills to bring you the very best resources about kingdom parenting. Sign up for free at rootsandarrows.co. We are now on air. Welcome to the Roots and Arrows parenting broadcast. Today, my guests, I'm super excited to have Joe and Angie Steinke with me today. Yay, say hello.
Yay, hello.
Hello, everybody.
Joe and Angie are longtime friends. We've known each other for, I don't know.
So long.
How long?
Since you were a teenager.
No.
5.
I think I was in my 30s when we met. Maybe just before I turned 30. I don't know. But anyway, these guys live in Kansas City and are just great, deep people that have walked with me and Tim for quite a long time, and are some of my most inspiring parenting. I don't even know if you guys know how inspiring you are to me as a parent and how much I learn. And I don't feel like you've given me a ton of parenting advice, but just your presence and what you say to me when you're talking about your children really deeply impacts me and changes my parenting forever. And that is one reason why I wanted you to come on the podcast, so that you can do that for everyone who's listening.
All right.
Wow. Wow. Okay, Joe.
So no pressure, but why don't we start off with you guys just tell us about your family and the people we've had on so far on the podcast have been pretty young parents, and that is not you.
Oh,
so why don't you
definitely not
so why don't you give us a little background and just about your children and your family?
Well, so we've been married for 32 years and have been parents for 31 years. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
31? So we have 5 kids, 2 girls at the top of the range, 31, 32, 31, and Leah's 29, 30, is she 30 or 29?
Somewhere in there.
87. Do the math. And then the boys are 27, 25, and 19. So we have a pile of kids.
Wow.
And, they're all out of the house currently. That is amazing. We have 3 grandkids and 1 on the way. 2 girls, and there are going to be 2 boys. Exciting.
Wait, what? Twins?
Not twins, but the baby is a boy, and
Okay.
and then he's gonna have a baby brother coming.
Oh, that's awesome.
Taylor. So yeah, our kids are Joelle, Leah Ray, Luke, Taylor, and Devin.
Awesome. Wow, I can't even imagine my kids being out of the house. But I was doing the math the other day, and I realized that when Tim and I, 7 years from now, when we hit 20 years,
Yeah.
Ellie's going to be 17.
Yes.
And that makes it feel really weird and close by.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is close by, and it's a snap. Feels like forever in their teen years in the house, but then suddenly they're leaving the house one by one. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had them 2 years apart, the first 4, and then a 6-year gap between the 4th and the 5th. We had a little surprise child. Bonus child. He's awesome. And he's added great surprise color and other dimensions to our universe. So Devin, but what it did is it put us in big family mode real young. We had our first honeymoon baby, Joelle, when we were 24 and 23, and became, just engaged in the high volume of what it means to start parenting, and also having a home that we wanted to open our arms to others to come into our home, because that's the way that we were raised, with a real generous hospitality. And it was imprinted in my world because my parents were very generous and grew in their capacity to love and receive others into the home, not just into a meeting space in our home, but actually live with us for seasons of their lives. And so Angie grew up in a high hospitality home as well, with a very gregarious father and a really generous mother. And there's always people around. Her dad was an alternatives high school teacher, and all the riffraff and their friends were over, and just everything. Angie had a pet monkey for a while. I mean, it was just crazy, but
For real.
yeah. But she comes from a family of 5 kids as well, pretty much close together. So when we met, it was really natural for us to come from these larger families of siblings and all the kind of crazy that involved, and have a built-in capacity for that volume shared between us. And then I bore witness to the beauty of it being something really wonderful, to receive people into the home and see life transformation take place because of how they engaged with our family's spirituality. That was very naturally spiritual, I guess. It was just the way we lived. And that became really attractive to many people that were in transition seasons of their life to drop in with us. And so we raised our kids in an environment where there was usually somebody living with us, pretty much from the time we got married on. I think in our 32 years of marriage, I think there's probably been only a handful of years or less where we haven't had somebody living with us.
Oh yeah, the kids have counted it up.
Yeah.
It's about 40-ish people that have lived with us for lengths of time.
Wow.
Yeah, over. But Joe's parents are so much they're on a grand scale, very inviting and accepting and open the home. My mom and dad were more family hospitality was kind of the big deal, and the neighborhood. But and my dad's students were in and out, but not for the meal or to live in, but more just around. So they were welcome, but we lived in a tiny place where we were all just smashed in together, and there's just no room. So yeah, but dinners were big, family occasions. Every holiday was kind of a big deal at my place. Joe's too, but I would say that you guys were more open to, the stranger and
yeah. So there was a season from the time I was 8 years old till 18 where we added it up. There was over 380 people that had lived in our home over that 10-year stint. Anywhere from
300?
Yes. Anywhere
Wow.
from 6 weeks to then my foster brother, who became my older brother, 6 years, and including about 11 foster kids that were in the mix of those 380 that came through for different seasons. Usually in their early teen years is when we had them. And again, this didn't happen all at once.
Right.
And it didn't happen with like 40 people living with us. It was really, it was stints along the way. But it was regular. There was always somebody else at the table, always somebody else around the living room fire, somebody in the kitchen standing there. My mom had to set up house rules of hospitality that were charts that everybody knew that if you're in the house and you're part of things, you're picking up some of the household responsibilities that will help the flow of the hospitality to function, just meals and cleanup and all that stuff. So we, I think I got imprinted with that expectation of this is how we receive the stranger at our table and in our home in times of transition and need, and that who we are as a family is a resource of grace for them in maybe a difficult time. So some of the characters were like single parent mom with two girls fleeing domestic abuse, and she was with us for just short of 2 years, getting back on her feet financially and emotionally, going through a healing journey. And I mean, just story upon story that way. But I'll talk about how we got started. Was really in our first little shotgun apartment with 3 bedrooms. We brought Joelle, our new baby, home to that house, and even before
Your single friends.
my single friends were living with us before they got
No. Wild.
and
We had more venison in our refrigerator and
they
antlers hanging up.
They were terrible. One of my buddies, he was the class clown of my high school. We went to college together. He would just drop in and lay in between us. While we're in the bed, he just lay down on top of the covers. All right, guys, how's it going? And he was like the football center, and he just stunk. And he didn't,
Oh my gosh.
So it was. So we had all the comedy and then some of the challenge. And one of the things that I often say about this aspect of Christian hospitality and the welcome of the stranger into your home is there's something about the whole thing that reads really romantically, but then it lives really sacrificially, actually, on a daily basis. And you have to have a measure of grace that's well beyond your normal preferential bandwidth for you want.
Well, this it touches on something that we need to talk about, which is, I think a lot of people hear the word hospitality and they think just having some people over for dinner and whether or not the house is clean and all of that. And you guys seem to be talking about hospitality with a different definition in mind. Can you give us a definition of what you have learned through your experience hospitality really is?
Oh, well, hospitality, some people seem to be born with that grace to just put on the dinner and get everybody over there with the classic idea of hospitality, because they're bent towards that in the air. But not all of us are really born with the willingness to open our homes. And I won't talk about that. Real hospitality is, I think, the willingness to not just open your home for a meal or even a stay or a long stint of taking care of, or housing someone. I think it's just a posture that you keep having to arrive to. I don't think that it's something that you wake up every morning and go, oh, great, who can I open my home to? Or, oh, great, who can I, welcome? It's a lot of a choice of, you're presented with maybe the raw need of someone, or you're presented with the, I don't know, just the question, will you open your home to me? Or, of somebody who is really, needy, or just, are you willing to, on a regular basis, fling your door open and invite people in? What are you welcoming them to? I think hospitality is what's in your heart. I think you can sit down on a park bench and talk to someone, and you show them the gift of hospitality by listening welcoming, accepting, receiving, with an not non-judgmental kind of posture. So I think it's a posture of heart, and I think it's arriving there again and again and again and again, and sometimes, a couple times a day. It's not like magically easy for some people and hard for others. It's mostly hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not terrible once you've opened your home. You have no regrets for showing kindness or so you've got to get over some of the stuff that you were talking about. Is my house clean enough? Is my home perfect enough? Am I good enough? Am I will my kids behave? Is everything how I imagine it should be for us showing hospitality? No, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, yes, I'm going to open my door or my heart.
So that's a very the attitude of hospitality and what's required of it to have it. Something else that informs the idea or the definition of hospitality is the Greek word in the New Testament is it translates as the love of the stranger, phileo xenos. And so this idea of the welcome of the stranger. And then Jesus, when he was asked, who is my neighbor, he tells a story about, the Good Samaritan, that comes alongside, and he takes up the idea of, I'm going to have to go out of my way to make myself available for somebody that has a need. Mm-hmm. And it's disrupting, it's inconvenient. It's not necessarily in the grid and bandwidth of my preferences. But here's why I'm extending phileo xeno, the love of the stranger to this person. So I think it's a Christ-like quality that doesn't come naturally much for the very autonomous individual home as sanctuary ideal that we have in America. And so it's very counter to the norms that we've been imprinted with by our families. Except for me, I got imprinted differently, and a few others have that have that openness. But this idea of the welcome of the stranger, and then I'd say the ministry of availability is a companion to this idea of hospitality. Can we not just invite you in, but are we available to you in this season of your life to be at our table, to sit with, listen to, pray with, counsel? Because that's what it's always been for us, is we've had to make ourselves available to the people that we've invited in. It was, one of my favorite Canadian folk artists that I've followed, his name's Bruce Coburn, and he writes a song about hospitality, a theme of this, and he goes, when they say charity begins at home, we're not just talking about a toilet and a telephone. Right. Anyway, get a Coburn quote in there. So definition of hospitality and what it requires of us in attitude as well as availability. I think that's what we've come to know by experience with it.
Yeah. Well, that's quite an address to, and quite a different way of thinking about it than just running around your house trying to get your house ready for a party, you know. And from what you were saying, Angie, well, and you too, Joe, it seems like what you're saying is it's not necessarily like, oh, I was born with the party spirit, which means like my neighbor across the street is constantly saying, oh, well, you just love to have people over and you're so hospitable, and I don't have that. I don't have that. What would you say to someone who has that response?
Yeah, that's an awesome insight. Just one, it's mostly not anybody's fault. We're a culture that is a homesteader culture. We went out, and got our little homestead and closed our door. We are, it's part of our like American attitude. We sometimes just don't know any better. But if you had a model or a couple of models of great hospitality or welcoming families, see, I dare say that you guys are challenging for your neighbor across the street to change her mind about hospitality. You're not just having a pile of parties. You're regularly, just inviting people over. And temperament, if you're an extrovert, you've got a little advantage, just because the party is fun, and it's exciting to have the guests. But we're talking about a couple of different things. We're talking about a party, getting ready to host a meal. That's really fun. That's really a great place to start. But I think that the welcome of the stranger has to be modeled for us to really see it well done.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're seeing it well done, and it's not all falling apart, and it's not all ending up in a fight or a lawsuit or something silly, I think that we can be challenged to be more generous. And I think that part of it is not our fault. We just haven't seen some really, really good models. But Joe and I actually have seen some great models, and how can we do no less than what we've seen modeled in our own families? And it's been so joyful, and it's been so, sometimes it's been really hard, and sometimes you get burned, but mostly overall it is joyful and has that quality about it when you open your door, or you've had a good season of hospitality, and you go, wow, that was amazing. For all of us, not just for the one who was receiving hospitality, but for all of us. It was good for our kids to share their home. It was good for our children to move over for someone else who doesn't have a home like we do. Or, not that we're perfect, but we love each other. And so it was good for my kids to share what they take for granted, or for us, what we take for granted in our relationship. So, or in our home. So I think the answer to some of that is just it's not our culture's fault, but we haven't seen it modeled. No.
Or it is our culture's fault for failing to model an imprint for us, something that's just, I think, a basic expectation of being a follower of Jesus. I think there's I think the overtures of the Gospels and the invitations and exhortations in the letters in the New Testament and the Old Testament prophetic judgments of God against Israel when they were failing at certain things. This is a big one. This is a very front and center issue. It's a justice issue, actually. Will you extend yourself on behalf of the poor, the marginalized, the stranger,
and the widow, and the orphan,
and the widow and the orphan? So I think the only way for us to actually get into how it lives would be to tell one or two stories of both how we took a spin at it and it didn't have a positive outcome. And then we took a spin at it with somebody else, and we did have a positive outcome. Because I think you need to hear that it's, you know what I mean? When you enter a risk in the welcome of people, and you're inconvenienced in ways that show your own areas of growth and transformation, and how selfish you really are, and how much preference has become your king instead of the agape requirements of God's love towards people. It's very challenging. So So we're young and married. We've got a little girl, Joelle, at home, and this teenage. We were young. So this gal, somebody says, "Hey Joe, you guys are dealing with youth and teenagers. There's this girl. She's run away from home. Would you take her in for a season while she's trying to transition, or she's going to be homeless?" Pray about it. We say, yeah, I think we can do this. You know, we're young, we're working it. We've got an extra bedroom. So she comes in and we settle some ground rules. And we, you know, she's not a believer. And
she's come around the youth group.
She's come around the youth group that we were running and stuff. And so we're trying to help her in transition. Well, we put a few ground rules, and one of them is, you know, no boys over. If you want to have a conversation with a boy, it'll be on the porch. And then I just want to know kind of when that's happening. And, you know, well, sooner than later.
That one's not bad.
The boyfriend was sneaking through the window. He could climb in on the side and sleeping over at our house.
Oh, I'm so mad.
And we finally...
I caught him jumping out the window.
Angie caught him jumping.
So I said, JJ, where are you at? Get back here.
So that was strike one, and we sat her down, and she was just a mess and crying, and I have nowhere to go, and blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, okay, we'll give you, TJ does not sleep over, we'll give you one more chance. Well, sure enough, within a month, he's sneaking out, and we're catching him. And then we have to do the difficult thing of saying, we love you, we want to be available, but we're raising, I think we might have both girls.
No, it was just Joelle.
It was just Joelle at the time. Pregnant. But we just can't have that in the house. And and you're violating a value here. So we had to actually send her, I don't know what, I can't remember, but we got her to a safe place.
To her mom's or something.
Yeah. But that was like our first spin with it as a married couple, and it was like
terrible.
Yeah, it's a wonder that didn't ruin you on it.
Well, let me add to that. We had a friend of ours living with us. That was a male friend. Anyway, a guy, and we were in discipleship groups together, you know, like a D group, and you do the questions, you know, of purity, sexuality, all that stuff, you know, the good discipleship, dangerous questions where you dig in and pray with each other over your struggles and sin and accountable and read the word and, you know, do all the stuff. Well, he habitually had an issue with porn and was living with us. And I said, well, let's do a whole cleansing prayer, a deliverance prayer. Let's do a burn, you know, the thing. And so we did the whole thing.
Right.
And it looked like he was free. Well, about 4 or 5 months later, I'm downstairs cleaning up in our basement area, and there's this hidden section of some stuff, and it's a whole box full of girl magazines. And so I have to bring him down there and say, what is this? And he's like, oh man, I've been down here looking at him, blah, blah, blah. I said, and by now I was like, I've got 2 girls at home.
Yeah.
And the spirit of lust and sensuality that would want to come in and through and around him. And I don't know if people believe in this or not, but I do. That whatever you're opening yourself up to, you're inviting into the space and places around you.
Mm-hmm.
He was, and I said, I can't afford to have that loose and causing havoc in my life and my marriage, nor around my pure little innocent girls. So I love you, and I'll still be your friend, and we'll be in a discipleship group together. But we're going to work this out outside my home now. Mm-hmm. You can no longer live with us.
Wow,
so
Joe.
Those were a couple early, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what I'm noticing in both those stories was the boundaries and the confidence that you and Angie together to be able to draw some firm, you know, flaming hoops of glory for them to jump through.
Flaming hoops of glory. That's a Ben Pasleyism.
It's totally a Ben Pasley. It totally is. Well, because we were considering,
Here's some flaming hoops of glory.
when we were considering having somebody live with us, he used that word. He's like, well, you guys have to pray together about your family and what your flaming hoops of glory are. They're going to have to jump through in order to be able to be in your home.
Yep.
And that so also in this working definition of hospitality that we're coming to here, it doesn't just mean that you open your home willy-nilly to, you know, whatever stranger you meet off the street is what I'm hearing.
Yes. There's a prayerful discernment up front, and there has to be unity and agreement between Ange and I every time. And then we've really heard the Lord on it.
Yeah, and if you're raising a family, you have to take your family into deep consideration, how it will, you know.
What season is our family in? Do we have capacity for it? If the kids are of age enough to have a contribution of their willingness to say, yeah, we're going to be a team with this. That was modeled in my home. My parents always got us together, huddled us up, did a prayer process with us and said, are we willing to take in so-and-so for this amount of time or an indefinite amount of time?
Really?
And and this will invade Michael, your room, because he'll share a bunk room with you. And then he'll be at our table, you know, all these things. And so every time, my parents never, once we came of age, well, I was 8 years old and everybody was mostly older than me. So I don't remember a time when we received anybody in my family of origin's home where my parents didn't consult and sit us down and give us a say with it. They were very honoring of us as an original family. Time, you know, the boundaries of time, vacations and retreats and time just spent with us as biological kids, but then often inviting others into that. But so this idea of creating flaming hoops of glory to pass through, as well as knowing the season your family's in, and then honoring the kid's voice in it, to actually be a player in it. And
but I'm going to say something to that. There's a point where, you know, your kids have all different temperaments. Oops, sorry, I keep doing that.
Right.
Our kids have a different temperaments. Some are more prone to being selfish and self-centered than others. So if selfishness was maybe the reason that the kid didn't want to agree to have someone, then we could override, certainly. But it wasn't often that our children, they were more excited about it than we were. We were probably more realistic than our own kids. Knowing what would be required of us on kind of a daily basis. Or you know, if it was a light hospitality, then it would be different. But live-in people that came to live with us or our kids had to make room, and we had to teach them how to choose a decent attitude. But we're going to tell a story about someone who lived with us a while just later, and when the kids were about teenagers and Devin was little guy still. A couple of those stories will be really beautiful to tell, and how it kind of got into our kids' systems. And we were hearing some beautiful things from their mouths and from their hearts too.
Yeah, would love to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, all right. So, well,
Rachel Ann
and Jesse. Yeah. First, well, I'll tell Rachel Ann. We'll just kind of go backwards. Rachel Ann was a single mom. She was raising a boy that she rescued from a terrible situation. I won't go into all the details, but she and he were needed housing, and we were, a family of 5, 7 of us in the house, but we had a basement. It was kind of interesting with our salmon carpet, but we had that room, and she came to us. I don't know how it happened, but her boy was about 6 years old. Devin was about 6.
She was moving out of a lesbian relationship with a woman, and he needed housing.
Drama.
As we were discipling her in her newfound faith.
Yes.
In our community.
She was she was in my discipleship training course, and she was just breaking free and, wanting to live a healthy life with her son. And Devin and her son were close. They were very close in age, and they were just little buddies. So we invited her to come. But Devin was most affected by Javante moving in. So Javante liked all of his toys and liked all of his stuff, and he had never had anyone invade his world before because the older kids didn't want his stuff. So I heard Devin whining about this, his friend Javante, who was freshly living with us. He's in all my stuff, and he's all. And my daughter looking at him, and she goes, Devin, this is his house too, and this is his home too, and we have to share now. And you have to share your toys now. And I heard this. They didn't know I was hearing it, and I was like, okay, they're getting it. They're understanding that we're making room for a family, and he doesn't have, and she talked to him so beautifully, so motherly. She was about 15, and it was just so awesome. I was like, yes, it is yelling.
Wow.
That was really beautiful. And they stayed with us for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, and it was really awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
They helped us, and they
And there
just
was
joined the family.
A lot of late evening conversations in the kitchen with tea and around all sorts of discipleship and personal transformation issues going on. And whether it was myself trying to bring some fathering grace to her, or Angie as a mothering influence and friend, and she just transformed. But we couldn't have done any of that deep work if she hadn't lived with us. It was one of those circumstances where this can't happen from a distance.
And Javante loved our family dinners, because we would ask a question, because everyone raced off so fast and ate so fast. So we would ask a question and have some discussion, and he couldn't wait. He just couldn't wait for that. Like, what are we going to talk about tonight? He loved that. So he felt very part of the team, very part of the family. It was very healing for all of us.
The other thing to mention is that we weren't alone in our care and nurture of them in their circumstance. We were part of a really healthy church community that adopted and embraced Rachel Ann and Javante in their journey. And we could lean on the community to help resource the things that we were doing out of our home in greater ways, which I think is really critical to say.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just if you invite somebody in for a season of their discipleship or transformation, it's like anything, doing it in the context of the broader spiritual family and resourcing it in different, you know what I mean? Sharing in the mutual adoption or the adoption of these guys, but you happen to be the host, host the space for the primary anchor point of their relational center in that season of their life. And I think that's super important, because I don't think in any season we did solo work by ourselves.
Really?
No.
Yeah. That where we just took on something without the context of the community being a resource to the people we brought in.
I mean, for instance, Rachel Ann came up that she was the birth mom of the boy, was trying to gain custody, and she clearly was not in any place to raise Javante. She just showed up when he was 6 years old, and the community got around and raised $10,000 for her to go start her adoption process. So that was a beautiful, amazing, community. I mean, there's a huge story there. It's the whole eddy of
Yeah, because what happens when you take someone in, whether they're living with you or just spending a lot of time in your space and kind of integrated into your family, when you don't have shared responsibility with a community of faith?
It can become two things. It can become enmeshed and unhealthily interdependent, where the person
Codependent.
in need feels like you're their only supply.
Yeah, you're their Holy Spirit.
Yeah, you don't want
You
that.
create
Yeah.
an unhealthy dependency there. And then secondly, that's when you say, well, if you do it alone, you get burnt out because you just need more resource than even your family to do things like this. It's just greater than yourself. And it makes you feel, I think, emotionally spent, and your capacity feels like it shrinks because you don't want to go through that hyperextension of yourself.
Mm.
So
Well, if the need is great.
If
If
the need
they're
is-
low maintenance, it's just a different kind of a feel. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are high contributors and really fun to have around, and
Yeah.
then others are a bit high maintenance and
Mhm.
have
depending, yeah,
more
need.
need in their journey of transformation. I would say if you hear something in what we're talking about, our expectation was always
Join us.
that the health of our family would be a hospice for therapeutic healing for you to transform into more Christ-likeness. And that's the language my dad would use. He would say, our home should be therapy. It should be
Wow.
where you can be known, be completely honest, and be also transformed in the presence of Christ, because we're hosts to that as a family. And so I think that part of our legacy is we've been able to prove that with people that have come into our space, but also in the context of hosting the presence of Christ in the greater community that's also said, we're going to come alongside. We will take this on together as you guys play primary host for the hospitality
Mhm.
and discipleship of this person or these people in their journey.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so I think it's important to know the end of the season too.
Yeah.
There's a time to close the door and bring some closure to things. I think every stint of hospitality has one. Some are more long-term, more integrated into the family, but
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
a beginning and an end, and that should be prayed about, discussed, and really clear. I mean, not when they enter the door, hey, you're staying for a total of 6 weeks now. But you discern together, well, maybe your time here is up.
Yeah.
Mostly when I was 9 months pregnant, it was for sure up. I wanted to shut the door, close the door, slam, like clean sheets and like regroup and get ready for breastfeeding. But like I didn't want to do that in public. So there was like those. I kind of went.
So that was one of the limiting
I was like,
factors of seasons of availability.
Oh, right.
It was 9 months from just before birth to about 5 or 6 months after nurse. It was like
the
there were
hormones
these
do the whole thing.
natural reprieves that were built.
Totally. We call that the newborn black hole.
Exactly. I would have my shirt up every 2 hours for a long 9 months. So, so anyway, you can edit.
Not going to edit. No.
So there were natural times, seasonal. This is seasonal, like everything under the sun, it's seasonal. So when you sign up for something like this, know that it's seasonal. God loves you as much as he loves your guest. He loves your family as much as he loves the one you're helping. He loves your children. If your children are freaking out and they're not settled and they're not doing well with a guest, it would probably be a time to reconsider your capacity to be hospitable. And you can do hospitality in and out, but maybe long-term hospitality guests might not be the season. So, and it depends on your family. You don't need large spaces though. I think sometimes we think, well, I don't have the space. Well, there's always a little bit more space. And there's always a little bit more room at the table. And even if we have to squeeze, it's more fun when we're together. So I think our American idea also about, do I have enough space? Do I have enough bathrooms? Well, yes, we do. We mostly do. So we mostly do. And so I guess the idea is also, it was hard for me to say yes sometimes. I would have to go with my hands open and pray with Joe because sometimes I wasn't willing. And I'm more cautious on the front end, but once they're in, like, they're part of the family. I'm in, like,
Yeah,
everybody.
you show up.
Yeah.
And then,
This has been part 1 with Joe and Angie Steinke. Join us next time for part 2 here on the Roots and Arrows podcast.